Hello and welcome students. Professor Kevin Taylor here to congratulate you all on making it to week 2 of 117 Concept Art and Storyboarding. Hopefully everything is going well at this point, but don't worry, if it isn't, it's all uphill from here. In today's lecture, I'm going to be covering the human figure. This is going to include an overview of physical attributes and the utilization of rudimentary shapes and forms in the creation of mannequinization. I'm going to take this opportunity to mention reference. You cannot have enough reference and research whatever creative project you're working on. Getting a lot of reference early means you have an abundance of work at your fingertips to support your creative process. As I'm sure you all know, Google is likely the first port of call for any reference needs. But when gathering reference, you should not ignore the most easily available avenue to you: yourself. It's common for artists to take shots of friends, models, or themselves that provide the exact poses and angles that they require for their work. I strongly recommend that you each consider photography when planning and gathering your reference. To return to the basics, bones exist beneath the skin, as hopefully we all know. You need to ensure you consider the mass that exists beneath the flesh while articulating the human form. The better your knowledge of musculature and general human anatomy, the better your art will be. Being able to rough out a pose that has the correct size for torsos and limbs, bound by these flexible and rigid bodies, will give your character a solid, real feel. While proportions differ from individual to individual, there are some basic rules that can be utilised as a template for your character work that I'd like you to make note of. If we look at the Spider-Man on the left, you can see that one is measured to 7 heads in length, while the other measured to 8. Somewhere around the 7 or 8 head system, a basic proportion is established that we should work to apply within our figures. I'm going to discuss this more in the next video for the in-class exercise. As we all begin as a cluster of cells within the body, evolving into tax-paying, Netflix-watching animals, the standard scale system adjusts throughout an individual's life cycle. The head grows relatively less than the rest of the body, so the 7 or 8 head system is something we mature towards. Be sure to consider this whenever articulating young adults and children if you don't want them to look like halfling hobbits. Just as bodies are diverse, so too are the range of shapes and feature arrangements that form the face. In life, we have what we get, but as designers, we can utilize a range of shapes to convey aspects of our character that we wish to bring to the fore. The visual design being the first impression that we can make of our character. In reality, there's no correlation between face shape and character type, but in design it is common to utilize certain features for specific goals. For example, a stronger jaw or bolder features may be associated with more masculine traits, with softer features less so. Soma types are the categorization of genetic trends towards specific physical builds, based on aspects such as metabolism. The ectomorph build favors a leaner, longer appearing body. This type can have issues building definition such as musculature. The mesomorph type favours solid structure and more visual musculature, based on a higher metabolism and responsive muscle cells. The endomorph tends towards larger body types, with a higher tendency to store body fat, resulting in what I like to call the more to love type. These are just basic body types, but again, there is a wealth of diversity in physical appearance. I mention this as, when developing characters, the more you know about them, the better you can see their individuality realised within your work. Our sketchbook assignment will help us take some of these figure drawing skills further, and I encourage any enthusiastic artist to take advantage of every opportunity to engage in some life drawing. This sense of solid form should be an ongoing goal within your work in this class. Negative space is a great way to make sure you're correctly assessing reference and avoiding overly thin, large, or disproportionate aspects of your characters or designs. It's also a good way to ensure interest within your work. While at first glance, a fledgling artist may just see a man with a body and an arm, but the sagging and bulging elements here add a lot of different shapes to what an untrained eye may see as a relatively flat, smooth surface. As mentioned in week 1, train your eye to actually look at the shapes and forms that it sees, and your hand to articulate these shapes, rather than trying to fill in the gaps with your imagination. This is how we get better grades and become better visual thinkers. Moving from surface detail to the building blocks of physical structure, a great way to gauge your solid forms is by breaking down your subject into a range of basic shapes. Basic shapes require no more skill than you exerted in kindergarten, and this is something you're going to be doing a lot of, so get familiar with it. If you can understand what you're seeing, and know what you're trying to achieve with these basic shapes, then you're on your way to building a solid base figure. This approach also helps you avoid beginner's pitfalls, focusing on detail before establishing the overall shape and form of a model. People usually go for this approach as they feel jumping right in will save them time, but all it actually does is ensure you're less likely to have correct proportion and have other general issues with your figure. Here we see basic lines and dots developed into simplistic shapes that are then advanced into the skin detailing. Students should practice this, as if you can't rough out your pose in this way, you'll never be able to draw a pose figure. Now at this point I will mention my office hours, so don't be scared to book in if you need any intensive help. Some of you will not have your drawing tablets yet, but I do encourage you to get it within the next week or two at the absolute maximum. For today's exercise, you're going to have to draw with a mouse. It's good to start working in Photoshop as soon as possible to gain a familiarity with its functions, particularly the use of layers. Creating layers and designating them for the different stages of your roughing and posing gives you a fantastic safety net for the incremental progress of your work, facilitating experimentation with limited potential for issues through errors. Often in a design, it is recommended to have different colours so you can distinguish your layers, such as blue for the rough work, as this harks back to the use of non-photo blue pencil for traditional illustration and comic books. Black lines are generally the colour for final line work, and I recommend you use a hard brush rather than a faded one with low hardness. As seen on screen, these rough lines and shapes are the first two steps in developing base poses through shapes in the detailing of forms. The more time you can spend on this process, the better you'll be at tackling the various character exercises and assignments later in the course and program. This has been your Week 2 lecture on blocking figures, and students should now proceed to the Week 2 figure exercise video. Please enjoy this picture of my cat, and I will see you in the virtual classroom.